Imagine finding a penny in every corner of your life, but when a cursed coin ends up in your sister's brain, the true horror begins. What's causing this nightmare? You've got to be kidding, I said to myself, after taking a drink of my coffee, which had the metallic taste of copper. I slammed my mug down on my kitchen table and was met with the sound of clanking metal against the side of the cup. I knew what was in the mug but felt too frustrated to acknowledge or think about it. After a moment, I looked back at the mug. I realized it was getting absurd to have these kinds of emotions and even fear for something like this. I grabbed my now cold cup of coffee and dumped it into the sink. 2 pennies came flying out, hitting the edge of the kitchen sink. The sound of metal hitting metal bounced in my head like a haunting lullaby. Something as harmless as a penny was slowly becoming my biggest fear. What is normally seen as lucky had become the thing that would taunt me day and night. After letting my rage subside, I grabbed the pennies out of the drain, quickly walking to the nearby living room and throwing them on top of a monstrous pile of pennies, currently living rent-free on my carpet. The pile mocked me. I felt so defeated. No matter what I did, more pennies just kept showing up, in stranger and stranger places. It was just weird at first, but now I can't even enjoy something as small as my cup of coffee. What did I do to ever deserve this strange curse? How many pennies would you have to find before you started to feel uncomfortable? 5? 10? Maybe 50? And what would you even do about it? Maybe tell a friend. There isn't much you could do about it, really. Just feel oddly concerned as to how you suddenly are a penny magnet. I've always been the kind of person to pick up change I see on the ground in random places. I have a little jar that I put all the loose change in, and put it all in one of those little coin machines every so often to exchange for larger bills, or gift cards, or whatever. It always felt satisfying to see the dollar amount on the dial screen, like a small reward for always having an eye out for those little shiny coins. It's hard to say when it went from feeling like I was lucky to feeling like something was plaguing me. I remember about a year ago, going to put a handful of pennies into the jar. I had the thought of it being out of the ordinary to have so many pennies, and when I looked at the jar, I realized it was almost all pennies. It was a large jar, and I remembered emptying it just a few weeks back. Yet, it was filled to the brim with pennies. I took it by a coin-counting machine on my way to work, and was amazed. Despite it only being pennies, it was just over $100. I was more excited than confused at that moment. My excitement from making money from random coins quickly shifted. What was once finding them on the floor of my house or a cup holder in my car became finding them in the sock I'd been wearing all day, or clogging up the shower drain, in my phone case, and even in a chicken nugget. Thankfully, I noticed before trying to swallow. I would tell people in my life about it, and they would laugh and think it's nothing, until they saw it happen firsthand. It wasn't just something that would happen in my house. It happened everywhere I went. I got in trouble at work because I kept having to dig pennies out of my computer. My co-workers got annoyed. They kept finding pennies in the coffee pot and sitting in the break room fridge. Even pennies showing up on their desks. They thought I was pulling a prank and got very annoyed after I wouldn't stop, and it only got worse. My friends would come over to see jars and buckets full of pennies that I collected over the last week or so that I hadn't had the time to take in. They would leave after the frustration of pennies showing up in their water or underwear. They somehow thought I was doing it. The thought of a penny curse was just too strange to believe. I wouldn't believe it either. Life was still moving. Despite the inconveniences that now followed me around, I managed to keep my job and keep most of my friends. Plus, I was making decent money from this. Unfortunately, the pennies became more desperate for attention just as I was getting used to them. A couple months back, I got a call from my brother-in-law. My sister had unexpectedly passed away overnight. I was in complete shock. She was young and healthy. What could have possibly killed her? They carried out a post-mortem, and I couldn't believe what they found. A penny, a damn penny, lodged in her brain. The doctor couldn't even believe it himself when he told us. Even though we have decided that the penny was the cause of death, we unfortunately have no idea how it got there. I understand she has no history of surgery on her brain or anywhere near her head. No event that could have possibly led to a coin being introduced. We saw in her record that she had an MRI a few years back for a concussion, and they didn't see a coin. It somehow made its way there in the last couple of years. She should have shown signs if something was logged for a long time. He paused and moved in his chair, trying to get more comfortable but only looked more awkward as he scooted. It almost seems like it appeared overnight. I know you want a better explanation for the loss of a family member, but something like this has never happened before. There really isn't a great explanation. I'm so sorry. The fluorescent light flickered in the cold doctor's office. As my family and I exchanged glances at each other, I felt a deep pit in my stomach. I killed my sister. This was all my fault. I didn't directly stick that coin in her head, but whatever was responsible for the coins wasn't happy with the torture it had brought just me so far. I knew it wouldn't take long for my family to start to blame me. I was already blaming myself. I just sat in anticipation as I waited for the whole family to point fingers at me. "Andrew, what have you done?" My mom whispered in a hoarse voice. "No, please believe me. It didn't have anything to do with me. How on earth would I be able to do something like this on purpose?" I begged my family as the doctor felt more uncomfortable than ever. "I'm not saying you put that coin in her brain, but whatever is happening to you is now hurting the rest of us. I know you didn't do this on purpose, but I think we should keep our distance until you can figure this out," my mum said with tear-filled eyes that wouldn't meet mine. Okay. Everyone needs to slow down here," the doctor added nervously. "What is this about Andrew being to blame?" "I need some more explanation," he said as he unclenched his fist, to find 2 pennies perfectly waiting in his palm. "Wait? What the hell? How did you do that? What is happening?" He stood up in his chair and started to find pennies hiding in his clothes. He frantically grabbed 3 out of his pants pockets and threw them to the ground, then 1 in his jacket pocket. Finally taking off his shoe and dumping 1 onto his desk, the poor man went running out of the office. "Andrew, please understand why we need our space. You saw Katie the night before she passed. We aren't saying you did this on purpose, but..." my dad stated as I interrupted him. "No, stop, I'll leave. I wanted to argue. I didn't want my family to abandon me, but they were right. It was unsafe for me to be around them. I was causing coins to randomly spawn near me, in a proximity that I couldn't be sure of. One thing was clear. They only appeared when I was close by. I could only keep my loved ones safe by staying away, until I could hopefully figure out what was causing this to happen. I left the doctor's office in a hurry. I felt frantic heading for my house. I knew I had to barricade myself in my house. It was hopefully far enough away from other homes, or people that I wouldn't endanger anyone else. Only time would tell. I was in complete solitude, acting as if I had some kind of infectious disease that I was desperate to not spread to any unfortunate soul. Even going to the extent of quitting my job, I couldn't risk the lives of my co-workers, despite how annoying they could be. Plus, I was making so much money from the damn pennies I didn't have to work. I bought about 10 of those 5-gallon reusable water jugs you see people filling up at the grocery store. They would get me an average of $400 per jug, and I had about 3 jugs per week. Money was no issue. I put them at the end of my driveway and hired someone to take them to the coin exchange. They would bring the cash from it back to the end of the driveway, and that's the money I've been living off of. Luckily, being around the pennies themselves doesn't seem to hurt anyone. It's me that's the problem. Coming to terms with this being my new normal was hard, but I settled in. I kept trying to figure out how this was happening, but was only met with dead ends. The main way I was staying sane was by trying to find a way out of this, but nothing. I was only met with more and more pennies. It felt like I was drowning in them. They consumed me. Not being able to take a bite of food without spitting out a little copper coin, needing to rake them out of my bed several times a night, just to be comfortable enough to sleep. The laundry machine would sound like a war zone, with pieces of tiny metal flying around inside of it. I could hear the sound of them in my walls, as they fell on top of a bigger pile of pennies within the drywall. My time was now spent with me cleaning up pennies, filling up countless water jugs and buckets with them, in an attempt to not have my home overtaken by them. I am writing this because I believe this is the end for me. Not only is all this happening to my home, but to me. I went to scratch my wrist yesterday, and my heart dropped as I grabbed it. A small round bump made its way out of my skin, the indent of a penny making itself known in my body. It was happening, the same end that came for my sister. I knew having a penny in my arm wouldn't be nearly as dangerous as the one that found its way into my sister's head, but this was the beginning. I could see this penny, but where were the other ones I couldn't see, burrowing their way into my organs and nerves? This morning, I woke up in much worse shape than I could have imagined. Multiple pennies protruding from my arms. Not just those, but I have severe pain in random places in my body. The inside of my knee, my ear, and I think, my lung. I felt a sudden gut-wrenching pain in my mouth and looked in the mirror to find a penny lodged in the side of my gum. As I lay in my bed writing this, I'm quite literally being consumed by pennies. They are covering my body at the same time they are infiltrating my body. Every hour, I feel more and more random pinches of pain appear, knowing I am closer and closer to death. Now it's a waiting game, to see if the weight of the copper on top of my body kills me first, or if a coin shows up in just the right spot in my body to kill me once and for all. Who knew something as lucky as a penny would be the thing to kill me in the end? Something strange is happening, and I need your help. Do you think this penny curse is supernatural? Or is there something more sinister at play? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if you're as freaked out as I am, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime and horror stories.